I thank the gentleman from California, and he really echoes the remarks, I think, in my sense, in the beginning of this discussion many weeks ago that he and I have spoken, as well as spoken with the gentleman from Maryland. I do think the gentleman from Maryland agrees. But I would just leave this subject, Mr. Speaker, with the fact that the gentleman from Maryland has said he will get back to me in terms of the offer that is on the table. And as he may know, and certainly the chairman of the Appropriations Committee does know, that in the year 2007, when the Republicans became the minority, it took 23.3 days to discuss appropriations bills for a total of 170.25 hours. If we compare that, and I'm sure that the chairman of the Appropriations Committee does know this or could find this out, in 1995, the first year that his party took minority status or was relegated to that status, the appropriations bills took 31 days and 205 hours. So we are not talking about anything other than the record here, and the record indicates the minority in 1995 took a lot more time than we did in 2007. Now, in keeping with the gentleman from Maryland's desire to get the work done, the gentleman from California says he shares that, as do I, as does our leader, as does our ranking member on the Appropriations Committee. We are committed to doing that, and I look forward to the gentleman's return in terms of the offer that I've expressed. And my friend, gentleman from California, I yield.
I thank my friend for yielding. And the one other caveat, as we talk about these committees, one of the things that I think my colleagues should know about the Rules Committee is that we have the ability to do virtually anything that we want in the Rules Committee. And as we've heard over the past few weeks, the concern that has been raised is this calendar issue, trying to get this work done before we head into the August recess to deal with these issues. And I think that it's clear that after this process goes on, an outside time limit could be put into place on each of the appropriations bills. That could be the rule that comes down if that's something that the majority chooses to do. The concern that I have as we look at the amendments, traditionally there have been opportunities for bringing about real spending cuts in appropriations bills. As we look at these double-digit increases in the appropriations bills, unfortunately, cherry-picking amendments, which is really what has happened so far with this process. And I understand the offer that my friend made early on about minority amendments and the opportunity to offer that. But right now, what we have is a situation where the Rules Committee is choosing those amendments if in fact it simply is a time issue, rather than choosing those at all. The Rules Committee could, as my friend has pointed to the 200 hours that have been spent, it would be very easy to simply say 8, 10, 12 hours would be the outside time limit for the appropriation work of a subcommittee here on the floor, and then we could do it under an open amendment process. And I thank my friend for yielding.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman that perhaps we are wondering on this side, having read the news reports, having listened to the gentleman on this past Sunday on Fox News about his, in my opinion, refreshing comments about his disappointment as to where we are in this economy and the stimulus that was supposed to have addressed this economy. Again, refreshing because not that the economy is bad, but simply because I think there's a recognition that the stimulus bill that it was called, that passed, has not delivered on the promise that this administration made about keeping unemployment down. I would ask, since we see unemployment nearing 10%, since the promises that were made of the stimulus bill was we would stave off that unemployment and it would be no higher than 8.5%, I'd ask the gentleman if he expects to be able to return to the subject and be able to put in place a plan to really do something to create or foster an environment to create jobs. Or is it, or should I believe the reports that I'm reading that perhaps we're going to have yet another stimulus bill on the likes of which we've already seen has not worked? And I yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. First, before I go to the gentleman's specific issue, I want to make it very clear that, first of all, Mr. Obey, contrary to what was represented, did not make his decisions in a vacuum. This was discussed. I don't want any implication that Mr. Obey arbitrarily and capriciously acted on his own. When the determination was made as a result of the conversations that ensued between chair and ranking members, both of the full committee and of the subcommittees, that was a collective decision that was made, not Mr. Obey's alone. So any implication that that was the case is not accurate, I tell my friend. Now, with respect to the stimulus package, the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we believe the Recovery and Reinvestment Act is working. We believe that there are an awful lot of policemen, firemen, teachers who are still protecting the public safety in fire and police and teaching our children. The class sizes have not increased because of the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, because of the investment we made in states to try to stabilize their fiscal condition, which is very, very bad, as the gentleman knows. The gentleman was not here, of course, but in 01 and 03, Mr. Dreyer and I were here. Some others on the floor were here. We adopted an economic program that the leader, your present leader, said, and others said, Mr. DeLay said, other members of your leadership said would, and the President of the United States said, would build an extraordinarily robust economy, would take our country to new heights of economic well-being. The gentleman, I'm sure, probably knows these figures, but during the last year of the Bush administration, after having passed without Democratic stopping it, changing it, modifying it, after adopting the economic program and pursuing it for 7 years, from 01 to December of 2000, in the last year, from January to December, we lost 3.189 million jobs. 3,189,000 jobs were lost. The worst economic performance of any administration over 8 years since the last 75 years. In other words, since Herbert Hoover. The worst performance. Now, in the last year of the Clinton administration, I tell my friend, we gained in the last year, when, as you recall, there was a slight slowdown, we gained 1.9 million jobs. So the turnaround from the last year of the Clinton administration and the last year of the Bush administration was 5 million jobs. That was the economic status that was left, the legacy of the Bush administration and of the policies adopted by the Republican Congress from 2001 to 2006, which was not changed, as you recall, because President Bush, of course, had the veto. The fact of the matter is that the Clinton administration created an average of 216,000 jobs per month, on average, over 96 months. The Bush administration, under the economic policy that you promoted then and are promoting now, I don't mean you personally, but your party is promoting. Let me get this again. Under the Clinton administration, 96 months, an average of 216,000 jobs a month were created. Plus, under the Bush administration, the average job performance over 96 months was 4,240 jobs per month. You need 100,000 plus to stay even in America. Now let me give you an additional figure. In the 3 months, last months of the Bush administration, you lost about an average of 650,000 jobs per month. Over the last 3 months, we've lost far too many, but an average of 450,000 per month. In other words, while we are not in the plus place, which is why I expressed on Fox News, as the gentleman correctly observes, my disappointment. I can't imagine that there's anybody in this chamber. The President is disappointed. The Vice President is disappointed. The American people are disappointed that we're not creating those 216,000 jobs per month that we did under the Clinton administration. And we're still losing jobs because of the disastrous economy that was inherited. And I tell my friend that it was not just the facts that argue that, but Secretary Paulson, Ben Bernanke, and President Bush said we had a disastrous economic crisis that confronted us at the end of the Bush administration's economic policy conclusion, and asked us to respond very vigorously to that. As you know, during the course of the Bush administration, we did that. It unfortunately has not been enough. We did that again with the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which we think is succeeding. But my friend would, I think, fairly observe that his 2001 tax cut, after 130 days, had not turned America around. In fact, in my view, never turned America around. Now, your leader talked about on that same show, well, we created 5 million jobs. There was a spike up and a disastrous spike down, which is why, as I said, 3.18 million jobs were lost during the last year of the Bush administration. We believe that the Recovery Act can work. We think it will work. We hope this economy comes back from where it was left us in January 20th of this year. America is experiencing pain. Too many of our people experiencing pain. We regret that. It's disappointing. We need to take such efforts as we can to correct that. Now, I will tell my friend, in addition to that, that at this point in time, there is no intent to have an additional bill on the floor. The administration's not talking about it. We're not talking about it. I was asked a question in the press, and I said, rightfully, we certainly wouldn't put that off the table. We'll consider steps that need to be taken in order to address the economic crisis that confronts our nation. But there is no plan at this point in time to offer an additional bill of that type. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his remarks, and just by saying that, you know, historical facts can be applied and used at will, and that there were plenty of opportunities to point and cast blame and claim credit, as there were Republican Congresses and Democratic presidential administrations and the like. So we could go on for a long time about the past. My point, Mr. Speaker, in posing the question to the gentleman is a result of the mere fact that promises were made by this administration. Goals were set. We were told this stimulus bill, if we were to act in haste the way this Congress acted, and in fact no one in this body read that bill of 1,100 pages, we were told if we were to pass that bill and it were to be signed into law, that unemployment in this country would not exceed 8.5%. As we know, as the gentleman knows, in many parts of the country it is well in excess of 10%. Nationally, we are on the way to 10%. We must and should, Mr. Speaker, in this House do all we can to try and get this economy back on track. It is not that we should repeat the mistakes of the past in that stimulus bill. And we await the administration, the gentleman's prescription as to how to address, as he says, the very real pain that America's families are experiencing. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
You won't yield?
Yeah, excuse me. I yield to the gentleman.
I thank my friend for yielding. Let me say that looking in the past is not fruitful unless you learn from the past. The point of my recitation was that the policies proposed in 01 and 03 demonstrably did not work. And I read the results of those policies, which were the policies of the Bush administration. What I pointed out is that it is the same formula that is being recommended once again from your side of the aisle. So it is instructive to learn from what didn't work in the past. I reject your assertion that the Recovery and Reinvestment Act hasn't worked. I pointed out to you that we've lost a third less jobs over the last 3 months than we lost during the last 3 months of the Bush administration. Is losing one job too many? It is. Is it a disappointment? It is. But after a quarter and a little more of effectiveness, 95% of Americans got a tax cut, got money in their pocket, as you know, as a result of the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. There's $65 billion which are having construction jobs being affected. Has it gone out fast enough? It hasn't. Is it starting to pick up? It is. Was the thought that about 10% to 15% would be spent within the time frame that we're now talking about? Yes, that was the projection. Has that happened? Yes, it has. So that prediction was correct. Is unemployment higher than we anticipated? Yes, it is, because the recession and almost depression, according to Bernanke, that we inherited from the last administration was so deep and so endemic that we're having real trouble getting out of it. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I would, in closing, leave the gentleman with 2 points. One, Mr. Speaker, the plan that the House Republicans put on the table, presented to this president, was focused on small businesses. If he looks at that plan, as the president did, and the president clearly said there's nothing crazy in this plan, which meant that these are things that could work. The president also, to my second point, claimed that we may have philosophical differences on tax policy and the rest, but he said to me, I won. So it is, Mr. Speaker, this President's and this Congress's economy. We stand ready and willing to proffer up yet again our plan to address the economic woes of the American families. We have a plan that would be at half the cost of that stimulus bill and produce twice the jobs. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent
For what
when the House
purpose does the
adjourns
gentleman
today.
from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, sir.
I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 12:30 p.m. on Monday next for morning hour debate, and further, when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday, July 14th, 2009 for morning hour debate.
Without objection, so ordered.